thought we could start off with talking about your new book, The Handbook of Psychic Self-Defense.
Oh yes, we're quite happy with that. It's only just coming out now. We've done work on it before, but this is like the latest full thing. And the reason I'm pleased with it is because it gives people really safe, thorough techniques for protecting themselves, cleansing places, and to recognise the distinct, what actually is a psychic attack compared to, bad luck. But more importantly, there's the techniques, and they're explained in great detail how to use them and things. And why I'm pleased is several exorcists and workers in this field have come back to me about saying how powerful the techniques are and things. So it's a full range dealing with if a person's under oppression, under attack, or whether a place is being done, all the way up to really heavy stuff of how to launch a full-time protection until it passes.
So could you tell us the difference between what psychic attack is and possession is?
Oh yes, a psychic attack is, if it's being done consciously, it's when somebody is using mental and emotional energy, what we would call astral energy, in a malefic way. I mean, we've all known cases when, somebody's taking a dislike to you in the office or at school or something, and you can tell when they're feeling like, in the room, or even, when, if your mum was fed up of you as a kid when you misbehaved, you could tell, like, I'm in the doghouse. So we have that sensitivity anyway. So this is like really more pronounced. But they're very hard to sustain, which is an important thing to bear in mind. But unfortunately, there's a nasty aspect to it these days. And that's because there are people trained in various things from various make life very, very difficult, for you. And it's not aimed at a possession, though there are really foul cases which are aimed at a possession. So I'm not saying that a psychic or even more so a magical attack results in possession, but they do have the same view in common, which is, to hurt the person concerned, and they both thrive on causing suffering.
So would you say possession is not put onto you by psychic attack, that's possessions by perhaps a demonic creature or something? Yes,
a possession means that, to use the word, a spirit, in this case a dark spirit, has taken possession. But there are cases where, with trained people like sorcerers and things, that there are some who will deliberately set about so that the person will become, possessed and things. And unfortunately, it's on the increase. And that's mainly because society's become so physically plane orientated, and it's become selfish and things, and many of the things that you would consider demonic appetites are now considered perfectly okay in society, to get the best over your enemies, to get as much money as possible, to thrive at the expense of other people, to cheat them with their computer companies, no names mentioned, and all those kind of things, and they're now considered like, this is what we do to get on, and to smash our competitors and this kind of thing. So the tenderness of the soul has, really been taking a big bash these days, I think, in Western society. And because people are taught that you can do anything you like to get ahead, if they end up learning about, psychic and magical things, they have no qualms in using that.
Would you say that, because it is the me society, and has been from the 1980s, I think, onwards, so is that kind of thought you're saying is making people perhaps not so soulful?
I think so, because you see it, you only have to watch the news, for example, but apart from that, you see it in people's attention, what they direct their minds towards, what they're after. And then, paradoxically, you also get it where people are still looking for some authentic happiness, some interior thing, but they're not finding it in expected sources. So, and then of course you can get like people who con them in those areas too, you know. But I mean, when you're looking at the collapse of organised religion, I mean, you only have to look at the scandals in the Roman Catholic Church at the moment. You can, but what will happen usually is that a person after a while, they become dissatisfied. After a while, you can have all the money in the world, and you still won't be particularly happy. You know, you may be distracted, but you won't be particularly happy. You know, or if you know, or all of the physical things, eventually they have their place, but they won't satisfy the real self, the real deep self. And so people suffer from what we call, the French used to call ennui, meaning like, you know, no true deep fulfillment. And so at first people chase after alternatives, you know, like the next film, the next piece of music, the next fashion, the next car, the next Apple computer, the next whatever. But stay around long enough and you've seen it all go around and come around, and you're thinking, do you know, none of that stuff actually does the trick. And so, you know, because there is a part of every human being, the soul, the desire for what is transcendent, what is more, what is lasting, what is the eternal self.
So do you think the dark side or the dark spirits, they're clinging on to that? They're finding people that are like that and then can take them over?
I wouldn't go as far to say if you're a materialist, you're definitely possession material, because if that was the case, the planet would be finished already. But it does lower the safety barriers. If you're dealing with a proper possession, the possessed person is the last person to know.
Because it is very subtle, isn't it?
Not the full-blown possession, no, but it's really like that marvellous book, and I forget the author now, but, you know, Jekyll and Hyde, is they have these huge gaps of memory loss. And it's usually friends and family who, because they're noticing this huge behaviour when they're off doing an increasingly terrible things, violence and, you know, all kinds of things. And when they're completely, you know, blank to it. And so that's why in societies that know about it, it is the family and friends who bring them to, you know, exorcists to be dealt with. So
possession's not like it is in the movies. They suddenly get taken over. It's more of a subtle and different stages. Could you explain that?
Well, kind of yes or no. By the look of it, it can sometimes seem as if it suddenly happened. But in fact, that's because the stages are so subtle building up to. So the classic way I use the image of warfare in the Middle Ages, where armies would lay sieges to castles, right? So the first stage is known as oppression, is usually. There are different traditions who have slightly different terms, but it means, you know, oppression. And that is when a person is kind of being like mentally pressured. So that's where it's similar to a psychic attack, in as much as somebody's thinking malevolent thoughts at you. Now, we could get into, if you want to later on, you know, how much was due to the human's behaviour. Because these things rarely happen out of the blue to full-on innocence. But by that I don't mean they're necessarily bad, but they can be very clumsy. So an oppression is where you could say the person has now got demonic attention. They're thinking, lunch. That's the first stage. So I liken that to the enemy's army has come to your castle and has laid siege outside your walls and your moat. The next stage is obsession. So that's when the demonics have gained, because they're always plural. There's never one demon. Like it says in Scripture, our name is Legion. And so they've now gained access to we call it the mind, you know. After all, we can, talk about the psychic things, but, humans are psychic anyway. So, like if people are very close to each other, friends can finish each other's sentences, or couples, know when they're being thought of, and that's the kind of pleasant side of it, you could say. But of course, everything has its flip. And so the obsession is when the demons have made mental rapport with the person. Their minds are stronger, of course. And so they're now holding the person's attention, and they have an awful feeling of being oppressed, being pushed down on. And so using my castle image, that's as if the army have broken through the drawbridge, the moat, and they're now in the courtyard surrounding the final keep, the tower in the centre of the thing. The third stage is full-on possession, and that's when they've now taken up lodging in the psyche, in the soul of the person. Well, in the deepest part of the unconscious, and it's now surfacing. And so out of fear and because of survival instinct, the psyche, the person, will seek to hide. So they'll turn into deep parts of themselves, and that's what enables the demons to then manipulate the body of the person and their behaviour and their words. And so I liken that to the demonic armies now come into the castle keep, and the owner of the castle has found one little chamber in which they're barricading the doors, and they're just hiding, praying to dear God that something will happen to save them from this terrible situation.
So you think they are aware of what's going on?
Not at first, not at first. So there's these blanks and things, but when the possession becomes very, very strong, then the soul itself knows what's happening, and it's helpless. And that's why in certain stages in an exorcism, you'll hear the exorcist talking to the soul of the person to join in. So it becomes like, the demons being kind of rattled from within and from without. I mean, it's still a bit of a tug of war, but still, nevertheless, that's the idea behind it. So, and at that point, the person isn't really responsible for their actions at all.
And there isn't a quick fix for this either, is there?
No, because it wasn't a quick. It didn't happen quickly, unlike in the films. You can see from the stages, and things, and also. They've laid subtly, and they put the hooks in, and they hide behind complexes and fears, and it's only when they're really sure that they've got rooted in that they will reveal themselves in their fullness.
Someone or someone's family thinks their member is possessed.
Yes.
What's the best thing to do?
Well, if they seriously think the person's possessed, then you need to go and see a qualified exorcist, and any decent exorcist will test to see if the person is possessed. Because, of course, at the beginning of the century and things, everybody was saying, oh, it's all mental illness. Because there is a point at which they look a bit similar. Erratic behaviour, antisocial, that kind of thing. But there are ways of distinguishing a real possession from mental illness. And it's important to grasp that treatment for mental illness will not make a possession go away, and an exorcism will not cure mental illness. So there is that kind of fact. The exorcist has to be discerning, because some of the signs of possession are the classic tried and tested things. They have an antipathy to holy objects, so they wouldn't like to sit here for very long, when there's images of the sacred around, or let alone if the exorcist prays over a person. I may need to explain that slightly. most people have an idea of like prayer, so we could say let's pray together, and we pray together for a certain thing, you know, like so. A friend of ours, her father's just passed, so we have a candle burning that was prayerfully lit for his safe passage to peace and, you know, joy. So we're familiar with that idea, praying together. But praying over is when somebody who has spiritual authority, with the agreement of the other people, prays over them. You see it most commonly in church when the priest prays over the congregation or blesses the congregation. You know, they're trained, if you could say, that's their authority and things. When that's done, in the case of a possessed person, now at first they'll just get antisocial and start to swear and call you names and all the rest of it. But it's all to try and throw you off. But if you persist, sometimes you get the showing of the voice when the other character slides out from underneath. You see, when the possessed person isn't acting in the possession, so to speak, they are, to all extents and purposes, until they get really bad, like themselves. Because the demon is hiding behind the psyche, because they're in the subconscious, they're hiding behind the psyche of the possessed person. So the testing is to force it to show itself. Even though it will retreat fast, it will like show itself. And that's how you can tell that there is another entity in there, a full entity.
I noticed in these last few years there's been many programmes on supernatural type things, so many people might think they could perform an exorcism themselves. Would you recommend that?
Not really. I need to do it because I can't find anybody else to do it. One of my teachers used to say, and he was a powerful exorcist, he would say, if you know somebody else who can do the exorcism, let them. Now, unfortunately, you get all these magical bother boys who like think it's like grand and they're tough and, you know, oh, it's like the old Marlowe trick in, you know, Faust, always thinking that the human can trick the demon out of the pact or whatever, you know, but of course it's untrue. I mean, compared to the intelligence of a demon, because they've been around before the planet was born, we're like hairless apes. They think we're kind of thick as they come.
And what to you is a demon?
Well, by definition, of course, there are many classifications of spiritual beings anyway. And by spiritual beings, I mean beings who are spirits, you know, not spiritual, you know. So there are those who, according to tradition, particularly in Western tradition, were once angels of light and who fell with the disgraced angel that descended. And then you have the lower classes of demons who are beings of spite and cruelty and foulness. In the same ways, I mean, you can look at it, I mean, it's surprising how much of what we do is actually inspired. I'm not saying we shouldn't take any credit for it, but I mean, we should also bear in mind, you know, people talk about they were inspired to write that song or that poetry, or they were struggling with the design. The number of great scientists who had their breakthroughs, like Einstein, was they were having a nap. And they woke up with this inspiration, and, you know, that was the solution to whatever it was. And so in the same ways, you know, that happens with the beings of light who inspire in us the good, the beautiful and the true. But
so it's like having an angel on your shoulder.
yeah. So who inspires the death camps? Who inspires the atom bomb? Who inspires selfishness so that our people run away and follow after greed and things instead of caring for one another?
You've written a book, The Sacred Magic of the Angels. So it's obviously working with angels.
Yes, yes.
Opposite of what we've just been talking about. So maybe you can discuss that for a little while.
Well, I should say, this is how I got into exorcism. The trouble is, of course, if you start with one, you soon bump into the other. So that's an ancient system of angelic magic, working with angels of light, the teaching angels they're called. And the old text says God appointed certain angels to answer prayer. So this tells you which angel is who and rules what matters they look after, how you can work with them. But the whole thing is safe. You can't hurt yourself or hurt anybody else. And then you can, make your requests, and then it also tells you how to know that your requests are going to be granted, because what the ancients called omens, or Jung called synchronistic events, within a specific time indicate which angel it's from. It's all listed and things. And then also how long it will take before it will manifest. So that's the key of it, really. It's because really the angels exist not to do things for us from life to life to life. And that's why you sometimes hear about exercises and things to draw closer to the holy guardian angel. It's sometimes they're kind of confused a bit with the higher self in some senses, but they're there for life. But there are other angels, because, for example, say somebody decides to give their life over to being, say, a vet. Those angels who have care for animals, because it's not just humans who've guardian angels. Even the great church fathers would say that all creatures have angelic guardians, because they are the creative spirits who maintain the universe. In fact, put rather poetically, if you like, or childishly, there's a rabbinic saying that over every blade of grass there's an angel going, grow, grow. Of course, it's really a nature spirit, but I mean, never mind. It's still a nice idea. The fact that it's the invisible that maintains the visible. That's the thing we have, is we don't understand that this is the end result. This isn't the source of anything much, really. So therefore, as a person develops, and there's also angels associated with the point in the cycle in which their souls came into incarnation, what's vulgarly called astrology. So there would be angels of your moon angel would be to do with where the moon was when you first took breath, and your sun angel, but they're with you for an incarnation. And then there are other angels, what I call vocational angels, like being a vet or being a nurse or whatever. So you can attract, speak of angels and you'll hear their wings, as they say. Yeah.